Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey Podcast. My name is Art and I'm your host today. And today I'll be talking with author Pamela Topjian. She has written a memoir called I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far. And it tells a story of her journey with a pretty tragic history in her life that she overcame some great odds to be the person that she is today, doing what she loves to do today. And it's a remarkable, powerful journey that Pamela takes you on. I'm very happy to be able to introduce her to you and that you get her book and read it. It's a powerful memoir. So we'll be talking about memoirs today and why it's important for everyone to write their story. It's an important step towards healing as well as leaving behind a legacy for your family. So hopefully after this episode, you'll all go out and write your own memoirs. Stick around for the interview with Pamela Topjian. That's coming next. And then I'll be back on at the end to say some farewells. Today I have a special guest on. Her name is Pamela Topjian. She's a hypnotherapist and has just recently written her memoir called I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far. So Pamela, welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you. Just my honor to be here. Absolutely.
I should mention in there too that you also do animal sitting, or what do you call
Yeah,
it? Animal
pet sitting, pet
pet
sitting.
sitting. There we go.
Yeah, I don't go to farms and stuff. Although I'd enjoy that maybe. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
how kind of house and pet sitting. Yeah, on the side from my hypnotherapy. Yeah.
sure. Yeah. We love pets, so I
Yeah.
think that sounds like a fun job taking care of them.
Yeah, and I'm in an apartment and I've moved a lot and I kind of don't feel like it's right for the pets for me to be able to have pets. So
Mhm.
I just do this and I can usually do my hypnotherapy wherever I'm at. So it works out really well. I get to take care of all these different animals and give the families peace of mind as well and still do my regular job. So that's
Yeah, we had a pet beagle when our kids were
awesome.
younger, but
Aw.
we were got to the point in our lives where we were super busy and always
Mhm.
gone, and she started acting out, messing on the
Aw.
carpet and things. And then we realized that I think she's hurting, so
Oh yeah.
we were able to adopt her to someone, and they
Mhm.
were able to take better care of her than
Yeah.
we were at the time. So yeah, that's a hard decision to make, but we knew it
It
was for the
is.
best.
It is. Yeah, and you have to think about the animal, is their quality of life going to be better off in the long run. So,
Mhm. But yeah, we're not here to talk about pets today, although I could
yeah.
talk
Darn it.
about them. Well, there's an idea for a podcast. Podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do all the podcasts here. Um, anyway, but I invited Pamela on because, as I mentioned, she has written a very powerful memoir
Mm.
about her life and experiences. So we're going to talk about that, what goes into writing your memoir, and why should everyone do it. I think because
I
as we
agree.
told off camera, I think everyone has a story to tell. But
Yeah.
before we get to all of that, I like to start off with a really difficult question, and that is, what is your favorite book and why?
you know, um, I can't say that I have a favorite book, but my favorite books are actually like memoirs or even fiction, but about people's lives. And so, one that I read recently that I really, really enjoyed was My Gentle Barn by Ellie Lax. And again, we're getting into the animals, but she's kind of one of my heroes, my sheroes. She runs a sanctuary. And so she wrote all about how she got into that. And I just loved that book. I know it's not real well known, but that's one of my favorites. And also, growing up, I had read the Judy Blume books, Are You
Mhm.
There, God? It's Me, Margaret. All the young adolescent girls read that, right?
Mhm.
And then the Go Ask Alice one from I don't know who that author is, that's in the 1970s, and it was kind of a written in diary form, of a young woman that was going through a lot of like drug addiction and a lot of issues. And I was probably too young to read that, but as you know from reading my memoir, I didn't have too much supervision.
Mhm.
so, um,
Yep.
so, so just real stories is what I like to read most. I'm sorry, I don't have a favorite book, but
No,
if
that's
I had
okay.
to answer that right now, it would be My Gentle Barn right at this moment.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, mine changes all the time too. So
Yeah, good, good.
yeah, I love asking that question because everyone's answer is always different,
Mhm.
and it helps me, gives me great ideas to what to read down the road. So
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you and your memoir. What inspired you to write this, and how did this come about? I know you write a lot about some of the hard things that have happened in your life.
Mhm.
Along that journey, when did that all come about to where you said, I need to write this down?
It was really a form of therapy for me. I was writing it all down to kind of get it out of me, to kind of get it down sort of on paper, whether I was typing or not, but just sort of as a metaphor, just getting it down on paper, getting it in black and white kind of. Um, I don't necessarily journal or have a diary or anything like that, but that's kind of what it was going to be. I didn't know, this may sound a little odd, but I was in a really, you know, PTSD kind of down place, and I didn't know if I was going to come out of that okay. And I felt like I needed to get my story out of me, regardless of if I ever published it or not. And when I first started writing, I didn't plan on publishing. I didn't think whether I would or I wouldn't. I didn't even think about it. It was just getting my story out, getting it all out there. And also, it was kind of like a burden for me holding this in here. And I felt like if I can get it out, then I wouldn't have the burden of almost, I need to remember this, or down the road, people need to know kind of a thing, whether it's my children, my grandchildren, ancestors. And later, as I was writing, um, you know, s- well, I guess it wasn't until after I published it, honestly, that people started telling me that this is really an inspiration, because I've come out of all of that place. But it took me 5 years to write it, and I was in therapy when I started writing it. It was after a big PTSD sort of episode, I guess I would call that.
Mhm.
And just started writing it almost like writing a journal, just getting it out of me, almost that and all that negativity that was within me needed to come out. It was like taking the really dark spots out of my energy field and putting them somewhere else so they would still be there,
Yeah.
to look at and to sort of as a record kind of a thing, I guess, and then clear myself of it.
Maybe in just a nutshell, give a brief summary of some of the things that
Yeah.
you experienced, whatever you're comfortable in sharing.
Yeah.
Again,
So,
yeah.
as in a nutshell, I guess, some of the big things were, um, as a child, I ended up having, we moved a lot, we got evicted a lot, I was hungry a lot, I was alone a lot. Um, I ended up getting bunion surgery as a young teen because I didn't have shoes that fit me ever as a
Mhm.
child. And I had some sexual assaults happening throughout my childhood, and date rapes as a teen. And then my sister was killed in a car accident, my older sister. And then I was a teen mother as well. And then two abusive marriages. And after the second divorce, so at the end of the second marriage, I was beat up by my husband, and I needed the police to get out safely.
Mm.
And it was after that, and after that divorce, that I just went really downhill. I thought that everything was going to be great now. And, I was alone. And I didn't really, at that time, I didn't realize that a lot of my childhood issues, a lot of the stuff from the childhood had led up to what was happening in my adult life. And I was a nurse for 14 years and I changed careers to hypnotherapy, but I always had that role of caretaker. And even my second husband was an alcoholic, a drug addict, and I didn't know it at the time. I knew he had a drinking problem, but I didn't know about the drugs until later. And so when I left him, it was very, it was like, okay, I've got nobody but me to take care of. I've got nothing else I need to do. And I just crashed. I just crashed. And so that's that's where kind of that's when I started kind of writing. I started in therapy and I started writing. I got on a bus and went over to California from Missouri as a kind of a last ditch effort. I was suicidal and all of that. And so,
Mm.
yeah. And so, I had 2 years really down in that dark place. And then from there, just now it's so amazing to me that, I'm just really like living my dream. I'm just loving life, everything I love. And, that includes the pet sitting, everything I love doing. And that's what really made me want to write this story, because so many people get stuck in that dark place, or
Mhm.
that, and to know that no matter how old you are, no matter what you've been through, you can get out of it, that there is hope. And I just really want people to know that, because I know so many people, especially once they get a little older, they just kind of accept that this is life. There's all these sayings of, if it wasn't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all, kind of a thing, or
Yeah.
this is just the cards I was dealt. And, they just sort of give up on any kind of hope.
Mm. Yeah, that's the thing about reading your memoir is as I'm going through chapter by chapter, it just feels like it's getting
Mm,
darker and darker. And
I know.
I'm thinking, this poor woman. I hope this story ends well. And
I know.
I had chatted with you before I read it, so if you folks do read it, hang in there because the ending is
Yeah.
beautiful, and
Thank
just to
you.
see you that you're still here with us and that
Yeah.
you've gotten that darkness out, like you
Yeah.
said, and partly through writing your story that will help it,
Hmm.
like you said, be removed from you. I think that
Right.
can be healthy. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. Everybody has a story. Everybody should write their memoir or write it all down, regardless of if you publish it or not. Get it out of you. And even if you've had just a more average life and haven't had a lot of trauma, I think that everybody, I'm in my 50s. So by the time you're in your 50s, there's some sort of trauma you've been through, you've experienced. It's just part of life.
Hmm.
So it helps to get that out of you. It helps to bring clarity to it too. And there were some things that I didn't really remember as I was writing, and I would have to skip by, and I'd go, because I did it like in chronological order, and I would skip by parts and just like put a couple asterisks or a few dots and know that I would have to come back there. There was something that I passed up. And as you're writing it, you start to remember. And when I had published it, so many people said to me, I've always wanted to write my memoir, or they say, I don't think I could remember it all, and I didn't remember it either. And so you don't have to remember it all at the moment. Once you start writing, and this is something I tell my hypnotherapy clients as well, is that's one of the things I always give as homework, or not always, but a lot of the times, is start writing. Start writing, whether it's to your child self, or, to another person that you feel has wronged you or something. Start writing what you think is going to be in there, that you think you're going to write down. Once you start, more will come. And it's really fascinating that once you just start, it'll just come out of you, almost like automatic writing kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think also it helps you to see, I know for me, it really helped me to see how my childhood had led to all the terrible things in my adulthood. Or, you could really, I think as a reader, you can see too that, well, of course she had terrible marriages. Where did she get an idea of any type of, healthy marriage
Mhm.
or even relationships? Where did she have any guidance, or, or just, examples or anything? So,
Yeah.
just you can kind of see, and not being able to. stand up for myself, not being able to speak for myself, not being able to feel like my feelings or needs mattered. So of course I got into these, terrible relationships, and of course I didn't leave sooner. I mean, it just makes more sense once you get it all out because we think so much, why did I do that when I was younger? Or why didn't I do this when I was younger? And when you write it all out, you can kind of see the progression of what happened in your life. And I think that's a big benefit of writing it all out. And again, regardless of if you publish or not, it's just getting it all out of you really brings a lot of clarity.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's probably where the hang up is for a lot of people is that, well, nobody's going to want to read my story. Why should I write it? And, you might have lived the most boring life in existence, but I guarantee your kids are going to want to know what your life was like.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's another thing too. A lot of my nursing career was spent in nursing homes and
Mhm.
in the Alzheimer's unit even.
Oh, yeah.
And so many of those people didn't even know their children, let alone remember their life or stories they would tell might be something they watched on TV or it might be the story and we don't even know, you know. So had they
Yeah.
had they written it out when they were younger, that would be awesome. I mean,
Hmm.
my mother is in her 80s now and she's starting with early dementia and some of the things she says it's like I was there. That's not really true, but
Hmm.
what you're saying, but you're not going to argue with them. But it would be really great to have if she had written her memoir in her 50s or her 60s even. That would be so awesome to have that for sure. Yeah, but also you were mentioning about even if you have a really boring life, nobody has a boring life. you know, and
I haven't met one yet.
that's one thing too about you know, with my story, one of the things that I thought about writing it was that I thought about publishing was we all have read stories or heard of stories of people with really, really horrific things in their lives, things that we can't even really imagine. And then they come out of it to do really great things, great things that, again, we can't even imagine
Hmm.
doing. And so mine is somewhere in the middle there. I've had tragedy, I've had some trauma, but a lot of it is very, very similar to a lot of other people. And so people can relate with that and they're like, oh, I've been there. Oh, I
Yeah.
remember that feeling. I know what that's like. And what I'm doing now, and there's more to come. I mean, I have such hope for the future, and I just know there's so much more to come. I just am so excited, to see what the next, 50 years brings. But, but people can then see that, that, oh, she went on to not do great things, but to live a life that I love. And so that's kind of inspiring that even though that, these things that, a lot of people have been through that have brought them really down that they're holding on to, um, that they can come out of it, and you can live a life you love.
Hmm.
But I didn't realize this until closer to the end or until I started going through the publishing process and all of that. I didn't realize that it would be so inspiring to others. I was just amazed at some of the things people said to me about it. So I'm really glad. It's all worth it. If I haven't. It was just published in January of this year, and I've sold some, but not a whole lot. But it's not about selling it. It's more about getting it out there. And I know I've already helped a couple people, and that's what it's all about. So that's awesome.
The title alone grabbed me, that
Yeah.
because I mean, that really put to words things that I've thought,
Mhm.
especially when I face discouragement and
Mhm.
I feel like, oh, I'm failing at what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. And then it's like, wait, you've come a long way. It's not
Mhm.
time to give up yet. We didn't,
Right.
like you said, all this
Exactly.
way to only come this far.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
my own inspiration too.
Yeah.
When I'm thinking about doing hard things, or have other dreams and goals, it's like I didn't come this far to only come this far, as long as I'm able, I want to keep going.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, hearing your story now, and I'm thinking back to what you wrote and some of the, dark times you were in.
Mhm.
Um, looking back then, could you ever imagine yourself being this happy and this at peace
Oh
with
my gosh, no.
yeah.
I would be happy just to be able to think clearly. I would have been happy to just be able to. I mean, I'm married for the third time, and this is a very respectful, very equal, loving, relationship. And I was at a point I didn't believe true love existed. I would never have thought that I would really even date seriously, let alone marry again,
Mhm.
And I'm going on for more schooling right now, and it starts in April. And just even being a hypnotherapist was a dream for so long. I would have never thought that that would come back to me, that I would be doing that, successfully. And writing the book and getting it published and doing these kinds of things, oh my gosh, just so much is just, yeah, it's so amazing.
Yeah.
It's so amazing, yeah. And that's why I love doing these too, because like you said, people start reading the book and it's, oh my gosh, that's so, it's just keep one thing after the other, right? It's just
Mhm.
like, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's like you said, does this girl ever get a break? Um, so then people can see how excited I am about life, and it's not,
Mhm.
like I said, it's not like from rags to riches. It's not like being really really horrific things to doing really awesome great things, but it's still just kind of a, these are the things that are, these tragedies, these traumas, and coming out to do things that I love for me. um, it is. It's life is just so amazing. I would have never thought I would be here. I would have never thought I'd be just, half of where I
Yeah.
am. Yeah, it's so great. Yeah, it's great. I love life. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something I've actually learned or am learning, or maybe even becoming more aware of, even in just the past 2 or 3 years with the
Mhm.
pandemic and all that's come
Mm,
from that, is to make that time to do your dreams, to do what you
absolutely.
love doing. That work doesn't always have to be unpleasant, and sometimes it is,
Right.
but um, pursue your dreams and make the time to do that, whatever they
Yeah.
might be.
Yeah.
And I think it's been, I started podcasting as a result of being home
Mm, mhm.
in quarantine and all that,
Yeah.
and I just really caught, the desire to, hey, I want to pursue more of these things that I've always dreamt about doing and never
Right.
done. So it's been fun. Maybe
Right.
one
And
last,
the thing is with the pandemic, I mean, that was it, there's been a lot of tragedy within the pandemic, a lot of loss,
yeah,
and not
yeah,
only loss of loved ones and friends and that, but loss of jobs, of homes, um, you know, life changes that are huge that were just dropped on people.
hmm,
But personally, it's been the best time of my life. It's during the
yeah,
pandemic is when I left nursing for good, and when my hypnotherapy, really took off, and when I published the book, and just so much came out of the pandemic. I mean, I got married in 2020, so just
yeah.
it's just personally this big crash for everybody else, and the world around me has been what really lifted me up. So it's definitely a good time for a lot of people to sort of have a different perception, and look at, like you said, what are all these things that I've always said I wish I had more time to do. I
Mhm.
mean, now we're coming out of it a little bit more, but it was a good time for people to say, what was I always complaining I didn't have time to do? And now what's my excuse, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, and unfortunately, and like you mentioned too, not everyone's experiences
right.
with that was that way. I don't know. It's things are different now, and
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is look for the good things in all this bad that has
Yeah.
happened. One of my favorite authors is Ray Bradbury. He writes science fiction, fantasy kind
Mhm.
of stuff, and I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but
No.
he has a quote I love that says to jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down.
Oh yeah, I know that quote, but
Okay.
I've seen that as as quoted by a few different people actually. So I don't know who actually was the first one to say it, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
just
That
jump
was
off the cliff and develop your wings on the way down for
Yep.
sure.
Yep. Just do it, would be
Yeah.
his message. And
Right, right.
um, I don't know. I sometimes think I want. Is that really the best advice to give someone? I guess it
Mm.
depends on what they're doing, but
Yeah, you don't want anybody to just take that advice and end up crashing at the bottom.
right, right. But that's been a quote that's been inspirational to me. Just
Mhm.
to stop overthinking something and just try
Right.
it out. I mean,
Right.
the worst thing that could happen is it just okay, that didn't
Didn't
work.
work out, yeah.
Let's do something else.
Yeah, yeah. I had first started my hypnotherapy training in 2010, and I was
Hmm.
still married to my second husband, and I was not able to continue. I was doing it a little bit here and there with some friends and family and friends of friends on the side, kind of with my nursing. But I still had to continue nursing completely to take care of the household and the bills and things. My
Mhm.
husband worked off and on and had a drinking problem, and at that time probably a drug problem that I didn't realize at that time. But that's when I was introduced to hypnotherapy, and it didn't really work out. And it was always kind of one of those things in the back of my mind that, oh, that was a dream that was lost. It was always something I wanted to do, and I just fell in love with it when I first learned of it. And so then when, the pandemic hit and nursing was just crashing down on me. I mean, it was never really the best thing for me, and it always felt like a weight that was just, crashing me, just squishing me. And so when it kind of in 2020, then I found another school and went again and became certified and started up.
Hmm.
And so the point is that, a lost dream isn't necessarily lost as long as you're still alive. You can come back to it. Maybe there's a better time. So this is definitely better timing for me than it would have been back then. And all that I've been through from that time till now has made me a better hypnotherapist for sure. Made me a better, more empathy for people, being able to understand, what these feelings are with PTSD and CPTSD, and having gone through therapy and everything. So I'm better for all the experience I've been through. I'm better now, equipped for, doing the hypnotherapy.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And sometimes waiting, to do something isn't a bad thing. It ends up being
exactly.
the
Yeah.
best thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I use the analogy of like the fruits. If you want that apple so bad, you want to make applesauce and apple pie, but if
Right.
you pick it too soon, it's not going to be good, right? And and you don't want a premature baby. You want to hold that baby so bad and get to know that
Right.
little child, but you don't want it to come too soon.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody is thinking, I want to write my memoir. How
Mhm.
do I start? What do I do?
Well, the obvious answer is just right, right?
Yeah. Just do it.
But the funny thing is like I went into this so blind
Mm,
that I I learned a lot along the way. And so the first thing I would give as advice is, first of all, just write. Just start writing. Don't feel like you have to remember it all. Don't write as if whatever you're writing down is going to be read by people. Just start writing it out, because you're definitely going to edit more times than you think you're going to. There's
yeah.
so much going back and going back and going back and going back and more editing and going back over it and over it and over it. Just, you know, crazy amounts of time. But I would suggest hiring an editor. I didn't at first, and I
Mm,
had friends that read it, and usually, they didn't give me too much advice as far as, I had put it through some programs for spelling errors and grammar errors, and the first copy that was published, when I got it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm seeing I couldn't even finish it because there was so much in there that needed, editing, that needed, something, it needed to be gone through again." So then I hired an editor. And so I actually put a post up on Facebook, because the people that bought it at first were like friends.
mhm.
Um, and so then I put up, if you bought the first version, please know that the typos and the errors have been corrected. It's been resubmitted, because I was a little embarrassed. So
Yeah.
if somebody wants to write it, don't skip, even if you're going to self-publish, even no matter what route you're going to go,
Hmm.
just, first of all, don't write it as if somebody's going to read it. Don't worry about that. Just write it all out, and then you're going to go back and format it the way you want, and edit it the way you want it to be as your book. But hire an editor, please. You can have 10 people read it and they're not going to get it all. You can put it through 3 different programs and it's not going to get it all.
Yeah.
So that would be my biggest advice.
No,
you know.
yeah, definitely. My wife is a big grammar nerd.
Mm,
She would edit all the stuff I write all the time, and
good, good.
I said, you're the reason I got an A in college, But,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I recently did a guest blog or a book review for a blog,
Mhm.
and I self-edited. I checked everything over and then sent it off to her, to the lady who runs the blog,
Mhm.
um, and she sent it back with corrections, and there were so many, and I thought, oh my goodness, how did I miss all
Yeah.
those things?
I know, and that's what I thought too with the first version. I thought, well, so many people went through it, and I
Yeah.
put it through a couple different kind of, writing programs that were supposed to look for these things, and I just was like, how did this miss all of this with all these steps I took? So yeah, you have to, even when you hire somebody, I noticed some things too that were like, that's not right,
Mhm.
like I was right in the beginning,
Right,
but
right.
but too with a memoir too, like some of the things I'm sure you noticed because you read a lot. So I'm sure that you noticed that when you read mine, I tried to write it as if I was talking. And some of the things that, it might not be correct completely in the whether it's a past or present tense or whether it's the grammar or something, but I wanted it to be kind of a style of more of like as if you're talking to me, as if I'm just telling you my
Mhm.
story. So it was a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, I did notice that, and it didn't it wasn't bad, that I felt like
Good.
that fit the style of what it was trying to be, and
Good.
so
Thank you.
it was very, in that sense, very readable, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
good. Thank
yeah,
you.
I mean,
I'm
some
real I'm relieved to hear that from you because
no, no,
I trust your opinion. Thank you so
well,
much.
sometimes I'll get something that, somebody self-published or something, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this needs an editor. This is really,"
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't wanna say bad, but it's like, "This could be
Yeah. It
better."
needs some help, right?
Need
It
some
could
help.
be better.
Yeah, there's a good story here. We just gotta get the
Right.
editor out. Yeah.
Right.
But I'm not an editor myself, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just second what you say though. Just don't be afraid. It's not that you're
Yeah.
ignorant. It's just we need help because,
Yeah.
like I said, I edited the daylights out of that blog post, and then I sent it
Right.
away, and she sends it back, and I don't know. To me, in my head, it sounded right, but then to her,
Yeah.
it was like, no, this is wrong. This could be better, and in the end, it was a much, much better article than
Yeah.
I could have done on my own, and that's
Yeah.
amazing. So,
Yeah, and you want
yeah.
what you're putting out there, you want it to be looked at as, I guess it's part of thinking of why am I doing this? But even if you're doing this just to get your story out there because it's a good story and you feel
Mhm.
like people will be interested or you think it can inspire people, um, even so, it's going to take away from the story if people are reading it and they get caught up in, wait a minute, that didn't really make sense just
Yeah.
because a comma wasn't there or, something was in quotes or shouldn't be in quotes or, just little things like that can really take away from it. So you want what you put out to look professional, to look, as like you said, as readable as possible so people don't get caught up on those things, and taking away from the story by having, words spelled wrong or incorrectly or something.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And one thing too that I notice a lot of people ask about is, so my name is Pamela, and I put in the book Patience because I've changed all the names. And when I first thought about publishing, I knew I was going to change the names, and I wasn't sure if I was going to use my own name or have a pen name. And
Mhm.
I thought Patience was a good name for me for who I was in the story, for my
Yeah.
life. So I kept that in the story, even though I have my birth name, my real name on as the author.
Mhm.
I kept my name as Patience in the story because I've changed all the other names. So that's something I get a question about occasionally.
Well, I like that. Um, it's very suitable to your story because
Yeah.
patience means, like even originally, it's this idea of bearing up under pressure.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that describes your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I know a young woman named Patience. So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, so we shall all write one. Definitely get your pens and paper out and put
Yes.
the story. I like what you said to write it for yourself. I
Mhm.
mean, I've talked to authors and I'm hoping to talk to more. And I think that's
Mhm.
maybe one of the things that's similar is when they say, I wrote the story for myself.
Yeah.
You know, the book I would want to read
Yeah.
or the story I wanted to tell. Whether or not it's marketable, that's all the stuff. We don't worry about that. Just get your story
Right.
out. My grandpa, who's he passed away about 10 years ago now,
Mm.
and he was one of my heroes.
Mm.
And we found he had written up a little memoir of his early,
Oh.
especially his time in when he served during World War II. And it wasn't long; it was maybe 5 to 10 pages long, but most of
Yeah.
it covered his time in the war. And I'm beginning to wonder even now. I mean, I'm so glad we have those, but
Yeah.
if he wasn't trying to process things that he went through,
Right.
just by
If he
writing
was kind
them.
of doing it for himself
Yeah,
as a form of self-therapy, yeah, which is
yeah,
how I started, yeah.
because it was just, I think he did eventually email it out to people,
Mm.
but they did find it at on his computer, and
Oh, how nice.
yeah,
See how wonderful that is to have
yeah,
that now? Yeah, and your
yeah,
children and yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, and we find out, my grandma and how they met and how they
Oh.
dated and all that. Well, they both served in the war. She was an army nurse and was
Yeah.
stationed in the Philippines and all that. And it's just a really beautiful
Nice.
story. And I
Yeah,
love that we have this now and we know that
absolutely.
story. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so awesome. I love that.
Well, it seems like you wear many hats in your life now, and
Mhm.
I happily do so. What are some other projects you're working on right now that you want to share with us?
Yeah, well, I am a co-host on a podcast. It's called Transgender Mentor. And one of the reasons that first I have a friend that's a trans man that does two separate podcasts. He does that one and Recovery Soul Food. And
Hmm.
I started this one with him because we would have these deep conversations, and we thought this would be good on the podcast, but it might not be necessarily for the recovery soul food one, and that's more about addiction and just recovery from things, which
Hmm.
it's not necessarily just about addiction, but that was his story, that was his issue that he had went through. But I had learned from the Trevor Project that children, the youngest victims of suicide, are the ones that are transgender. So we've got 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds that want to kill themselves, that attempt suicide because they don't feel right within their body, they don't feel accepted with their family, with their within themselves, and they feel different from who they are because of this.
Hmm.
And it's a very different thing than being gay or lesbian. The LGBTQ community, the transgender part of that is very different than the rest of it because it's not about attraction. So I thought it was really important to do that project with him because if there was two transgender people or two people of the LGBTQ community doing it, then people like me and
Hmm.
might not watch it or be interested in watching it. But having me there kind of is, you know, kind of shows that we're working towards equality and bringing more understanding, um,
Hmm.
just and unity for everybody. And it's not just about transgender or the LGBT community. It's we're all inclusive, we're all just human, kind of a thing. So that's an important thing that I'm doing, and that can be found on YouTube and Anchor and all that. But I also have just started my a course for an integrative healing arts practitioner that I'm going to add into my hypnotherapy because I really want to work holistically with people and not just have this one thing that I can do. I want to help them in all ways. But also, I have actually started writing a book about my experience writing my memoir because I've been asked so much about it and I thought there would be a lot of interest in it. And if I can get enough out there, in a book, and then I will. But I think that I
Yeah.
can. But I'm giving myself a year to kind of work on it and see where it goes. So, but yeah, as far as the hats, pet sitter, hypnotherapist, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know,
A little bit, whatever
co
sounds,
co-host, yeah, and
whatever you
yeah,
find you might want to try, you do it, and that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. I didn't come this far to only come this far, right?
That's right. That's right. Um, well, I'll make sure to have a link in the show notes to the podcast and different things you
Okay.
do. I watched some clips of it, and it's really just a very positive
Yeah.
community there,
Thank
and
you.
I'd
Yeah.
recommend you watching that if that's a topic of interest to you. So then I like to ask a couple of final questions before we go, and I think we did
Mhm.
cover some of them
Mhm.
about giving advice to new writers,
Mhm.
especially memoir writers.
Yeah.
Get an editor, write for yourself,
Yeah.
get your story out. Well, the question I love to ask though, because it's all been different, but when did you
Mhm.
discover that words have power?
You know, not until I started writing, I think, because I mean, you read my story, so you know
Mhm.
that I never really was able to talk to anybody. I never was able to even understand my own emotions and express myself. And it wasn't until, I started therapy and started writing that I really realized how important words are. And even reading other people's stories, um, have been such an inspiration to me that it's like, then you realize the feelings that you can get from that and the connectedness that you can feel from that, is really powerful. But there's two things, there's two kind of quotes or sayings. So there's a saying that's, words cast spells, and that's why we call it spelling. So I love that because, it is so true. And I hear people talking, and this is part of my hypnotherapy stuff, is I hear people talking so down about themselves, or they have limiting beliefs, and they'll say, well, I can't do this because of this and this and this, or this is part of my life, it's just who I am. Well, you're kind of just putting that on yourself, or they say my depression or my anxiety, rather than it being, they're talking about it like it's their right arm. It's not.
Mhm.
It's something that's going on with you, but it's not part of you your whole existence. You don't have to take that on as an identity. There's so much more to you than whatever, mental issues that you're going through. So, that's really important. But also, there's a quote in a song, and I can't even tell you what song, but it says, these words are all I have, so I write them because I need them just to get by. And
Mm.
I really, that's how I felt when I was writing out my story in the beginning. This is all I have. This is the only one I have I can say this to, other than your therapist. I couldn't even talk to the therapist that well, but um, writing everything down was like I was free to say anything I wanted to say when I was writing it for me. And of course, you go back and you edit when you're writing it to be published.
Mhm.
But, so these words are all I have. So I write them because I need them just to get by. That was so powerful to me.
Yeah, that's I like especially the first one. That might be the episode title there. The
Ah,
what was it again? The words are
word, words cast spells. That's why we
there you
call
go.
them spelling. That's why we
Words
call it
cast spells.
spelling.
Yeah, I like that.
Yes.
I really like that. Wow, that's awesome. Um, all right. Well, then I usually ask if there's any recent reads you could recommend. I know you did recommend one memoir, but anything else you
Yeah.
wanted to say might be worth looking at?
Yeah, so there's Jen Elizabeth wrote Shape of a Woman, and she's one of the inspirations for me to publish my story. And she's one of those that has been through some really horrific things and has gone on to do some really awesome things. But I could still relate with a lot of what she went through as a child. She had an abusive, drug addicted mother, and went through a lot of the same kinds of things that I had went through, even though I didn't have that kind of parent in my life. But I would recommend reading her book, if you like memoirs and if you like stories of being down and coming up out of it. Also, Joe Potosi, when the dust settled, um, he does a lot of podcasts and that, but he
Mhm.
has a story of horrific abuse, and he's come out of it, and he wrote about it, and I think he's writing a part two, and he kind of broke the chain of abuse, broke that cycle of abuse within his family. But he had been through some really horrific things, and and has come out of it. So I love those stories, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would recommend them. And then yeah, My Gentle Barn by Ellie Lax, which is a more lighthearted story. But if you love animals, or if you're vegan or a vegetarian, or like to find out how people got to where they are, that's a good story for that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely check that one out. That sounds right up my alley. So,
Yeah, good.
yeah. All right. And then where can folks find you online if they want to check out your work and your
Yeah. So, well, I have a link tree, and it's just Pamela Topjian, no spaces. And it's got all the links in there, but also hypnobreakthrough.com. Um, and then you can find my book on Amazon. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
All right. Well, as always, links will be in the show notes. And
Great.
Pamela, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
I
you. Thank you.
feel like we could have talked for hours and hours, but
Yeah. Yeah.
all right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess our encouragement is to all of you to go out and write your story
Hmm.
and tell someone about it, because your life matters and your
Yeah.
story is beautiful. Um,
Absolutely.
so until next time, thanks again, Pamela, for coming on, and
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you later. What do you think about writing your memoir, writing your story? Everyone has a story. It's a powerful thing to be able to write it down and to encourage others with your story. Stories have power, words have power, and I would love for your voice to be added to that mix. If you have a story about yourself that you would love to share on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe it's an interesting story that happened to you. Maybe it was a difficulty or a tragedy, a tragic thing that happened to you. Maybe it's a funny story that you love to share. I'd love to hear your family stories. So either you can email me at bookshelfodysseypodcast@gmail.com, and you can either write in or send me a voicemail or whatever to a voice message sharing your story. So that will be our episode today. Again, you'll find links in the show notes about where you can find Pamela's book and some of the other things we talked about. The other books we've talked about will be linked down below. And there are some other ways there as well that you can help support the podcast. So that's it for me for today. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another author interview. I've got some great ones lined up coming up here soon. So stay tuned for those. And until next time, happy reading, everyone. Take care.